All right, Luke chapter 12 is where we're going to be today in our Bibles. Luke chapter 12. And again, like I said earlier, if you got your books, you want to follow along there. I hope those have been a blessing to you with some of the extra Bible study and extra resources there to help you kind of continue to take what we learn on Sundays and apply it to your lives. If you haven't been here in a while, or it's your first time in a little bit, we're in the series called Abound, where we talk about this abundant life that Jesus promises us. And it may look a little different, we're starting to see, than what we hear. You hear the word abundant life and you think that it's everything is awesome, puppy dogs, rainbows, and everything going your way. And yet we're starting to understand that the abundant life, while it's actually something even better than that. It's better than just getting your way. It's better than just having things and being seen a certain way and having life like you like it. In fact, the first week we talked about how essentially it's what we were calling and every one of these areas that we're going to be talking about, there's a catch-22. There's the holy catch-22 of you think you need to go about getting this way, but Jesus actually says the opposite. Jesus' way is backwards and upside down according to what the world wants to tell you. If you want to get true life, you have to what? Give it up, right? You have to give up life in order to gain real life. You have to give up your preferences. You have to give up your way. You have to take up your cross and follow Him. And then we talked about how that looks in our schedules last week. We talked about how could God redeem our routines in such a way that we could live the abundant life when it comes to our schedule, which the busier you get and you start getting married and start having kids and you start working a full-time job and you start to realize that what you do and how you spend your time can lead to either blessings or curses. And so we learned a lot last week about what God says about how we value our time and how really we should be measuring things not in dollars and cents but seconds and minutes, that your time is the most valuable asset that you have. And so if you missed any of those, definitely go back to the website, to the YouTube machine there and watch those, because I was blessed by the word in them, and I hope you were too. But today we want to talk about how to master your money. And I say that because far too many of us, I title it this way because far too many of us, our money is our master. And again, Jesus wants us to do a little differently than what the world says. But I got to admit, I sound like one of those guys, like I should be wearing a slick, like my hair should be sort of parted and have a slick suit and be like, I'll teach you. And if you pay me 4 easy installments of X, Y, and Z, I can tell you how to make money. And I'm sitting there, and by the way, there's a lot of that out there. There's some really good financial advisors, and then there's some, it's like that the wolf from Mickey Mouse, like the used car salesman guy, that the only way he makes money is if you pay him to tell you how to make money. What? I don't quite get that. But there's a lot out there because there's a lot of people that want to figure this out. How do we master our money? How do things in this complex world, and a lot of us, we start talking economy and we start talking, inflation, and everybody's like, oh, I don't understand any of this. I just want to go to work and come home and have enough to eat, right? And have enough to not be stressing. And so there's a lot of people out there trying to tell you how to do that. And there's a lot of good things. I just recently bought a copy of the Dave Ramsey book to put on our bookshelf here, because I know some of us have been blessed by some of the principles of a guy like Dave Ramsey, and he will tell you debt is bad, right? And you want to snowball and get rid of your debt and stuff like that. But then the other day, I keep seeing this, and I guess I wasn't old enough but does anybody know Robert Kiyosaki? Anybody ever heard of him? He's this Asian guy. He wrote a book with Donald Trump. Apparently, he wrote a book in the 90s that got real popular. Again, I was 10 to 15 in the 90s. I didn't care about anything but my allowance back then, so I probably didn't know who he was. But he tells you, I kept seeing him in my Facebook or my Instagram feed talking about how debt is good. I'm like, well, then which is it? Is it Dave Ramsey or is it this good? Both of them have got money. Both of them are rich. So how do you know how we're supposed to approach these sorts of things? And then I realized, maybe we should see what Jesus has to say about that. What a novel idea, because Jesus isn't afraid to talk about money. He just may do it in a different way than what we're used to. And so instead of going through all these different options for how the world says you're supposed to handle money, let's talk about how Jesus does it. And the reason I chose Luke 12 was this passage sort of starts like the beginning of the Dave Ramsey show. Have y'all ever heard that on the radio, the Dave Ramsey show? It's one of those call and he answers the questions, you know. So they'll call, hey Dave, this is Kyle from Wisconsin. How you doing, Dave? Better than I deserve. It's good to be here. I'm Dave Ramsey. Right? And then he answers the question. Well, you know, and he gives them a problem and he solves it. Well, that's kind of what's happening here in Luke chapter 12. You got Jesus, and then you got some guys coming up going, Jesus, help us settle this financial problem that we have here. And Jesus, it's interesting. And by the way, this is I'm reading a lot of Bible here this morning, so we're going to do what I sometimes do, where we read a little bit, and then we stop and talk about it, and then we keep reading, and we stop and talk about it, so that we don't get overwhelmed here. But we're going to go Luke chapter 12, 13 through 34 in total. But let's just start with chapter or verse 13. It says, "Then someone called from the crowd, 'Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me.'" So they're having some squabbles over, you know, who's getting the family farm, who's getting what from the estate. And Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" And then he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed, because life is not measured by how much you own." So he answered the question, but he didn't answer the question, right? They're saying, Jesus, help us figure out how we're going to divide up and this money and these material things. And Jesus is going, that's not my job. Why are you asking me? Again, this is the God of the universe who has the wisdom to answer that question. But he's like, that's not why I'm here, right? Ain't nobody got time for that, is what he was saying. He's like, in fact, let's just get down to it. And this is the point that he's making. The first point I want to make to you today, if you're taking notes, the abundant life, it is not dependent on abundant cash. Right? We like, abundant life. That means I got it, and I've flown it, and I'm making it, and right? The abundant life that Jesus is offering us here does not necessarily mean abundant cash. If you tithe here at the end of our service, we're going to take up offering. Don't let me forget. That would be a funny thing to do, to forget to take up offering when I'm talking about money. But Jesus is not saying if you will tithe this right here, then you are going to automatically have abundant cash. Your bills are going to get paid, and your car's going to get paid off, and all this stuff. And what Jesus is telling us is this abundant life that he promises us, he's not promising us abundant cash. Maybe it will, right? But we need to redefine what we mean by healthy finances. We need to redefine what it means to be financially stable. It's not always more. It's not always that you bring home more at the end of your 2 weeks when you get your paycheck, right? We need to define healthy finances as having more than enough, and so that we can use our time and our money in kingdom building ways, right? There's a lot of rich people that are not financially healthy because they're spending a lot of money on things that are useless, that are stupid, that are selfish, that could be spent somewhere else. Notice Jesus didn't even, who did what, and let's talk about your family dynamic. No, he said, let's get to the root of it. Guard against greed. So this is what's motivating you here today, greed. Guard against it, because your life being, again, the reason they were still arguing about it was because they thought their life was going to be so much better if they just got their fair share. And I think that's us too. We think if we could just get our fair share, if things would have just worked out better for us, if Mama hadn't have given the house to my idiot brother, or if that promotion would have gotten to me and not this other person, then I would have the abundant life. And Jesus says, whoa now. Life is not measured by what you own and what you have. In fact, 1 Timothy 6, 9 and 10 says people who long to be rich, whether they get there or not, that's again not the point, that they long to be rich, fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people, craving money, again, that's the motivation, that's at the core, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. as my favorite song in middle school said, mo money, mo problems, right? Right? You're going to have some issues that bring, now it's stuck in your head. Sorry about that. But the problem is there's a lot of stuff that we invite on ourselves when we chase riches, when we chase money. And again, you're going, isn't abundant mean more, Ben? Don't you mean you want me to have more money? I'm saying abundant means more than you need, right? And a lot of times we get that out of whack. It doesn't mean more, it means more than you need. So let's keep reading, because then Jesus kind of gives a little illustration here. Verse 16, he says, then he told him a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. And he said to himself, what should I do? I don't have enough room for my crops. Then he said, I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, you fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for? Yes, a person is foolish to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God. Again, some of us, this goes against what, especially, I think it was my grandparents' age, whatever age came through the Great Depression, really, I've noticed stressed savings. That, man, if you just stack it up, that you don't need to spend frivolously, you just need to stack. And a lot of us were taught, don't penny pinch here and save there. But the second thing that I think Jesus is pointing out to us is that not all savings is good stewardship. Just because you are saving money doesn't mean you're a good steward of that money, is what I'm saying. Now, this is tricky because there's plenty of scriptures that say to save money, right? I'm not up here saying that savings is a bad thing. Proverbs 21:20 says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. So it's a good thing, according to the wisdom of the Bible, for you to have a savings account to prepare for a rainy day, literally and metaphorically speaking, right? But not all savings is automatically good stewardship and automatically motivated the right way. Ecclesiastes 5:13 tells us this. There's another serious problem I've seen under the sun. Hoarding riches actually harms the saver. There's a difference between saving and hoarding. There's a difference between being wise and being faithless. When you save with the intent to bless others and to provide for your family and to actually be a good example to other people, it's blessed by God. But when you do it to build up your own pride and your own power, God's going to be against it, right? Save for a purpose, not as a replacement for your faith, right? If you start putting I had a friend who got, for the first time in his life, started to save some money, and he got his savings account up to a certain amount. I won't tell you how much, but it was more than I've ever had in my savings account, I'll tell you that. And he built it up. And then all of a sudden he realized that God had made him, that whenever he had hit his point, anytime it dipped below, he started to get, I don't have enough money in savings. And he began to put his trust and his hope and his faith in that nest egg and not God providing for him, which God had already always provided for him, right? And he said, you know what I did? God made me take my savings account way down. He said, no, I didn't go buy like a big screen TV with it, right? Like I donated it here and I invested it in other things. But he said, he made me, I felt like God was saying, you got to do this because you put far too much hope in your savings account. And that's not what's going to save you. And what Jesus' example here is he's showing someone who went overboard. He's showing someone who had again, for us it's different. It's ones and zeros on a computer screen or on a phone screen for us. Now, this guy was building a bigger barn just to hold his stuff. And instead of actually trusting that after you've saved enough to be wise that you begin to share it because, hey, he's going to die tonight. And what's the use of having all that stuff? And so the particulars of that may look very different to each one of us. You may have an idea of how much you think you need in your savings account. Maybe you need to pray about that. But I think we need to make sure that we don't just automatically think that saving money is always the right thing to do, because God may be wanting to use that extra in your life to bless somebody else, right? And you say, well, I really need more in my savings account. And then you don't have a chance to bless someone else, and then they miss out on that blessing, and you miss out on an eternal blessing. And let's keep going, because Jesus keeps with that. He says, then turning to his disciples, verse 22, Jesus said, that is why I tell you not to worry about everyday life, whether you have enough food to eat or clothes to wear. For life is more than food, your body more than clothing. Look at the ravens. They don't plant or harvest or store food in their barns, and God feeds them. And you are far more valuable to him than any birds. Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? And if worry can't accomplish a little thing like that, what's the use of worrying over bigger things? Look at the lilies and how they grow. They don't work to make their clothing, yet Solomon in all of his glory was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for the flowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Why do you have so little faith? And don't be concerned about what to eat and what to drink. Don't worry about such things. These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers all over the world, but your Father already knows your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else, and he will give you everything that you need. Y'all, this is more than about a particular number or a particular amount of food in the cabinet or a particular amount of whatever you're saving up. It's about what does it do for you in your mind, in your heart, in your thoughts. I don't know if you know this, but in America, which is, I heard something on the radio this morning, funny enough, that if you make $34,000, I think is the number. If you make $34,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of the world, right? So in a prosperous country like America, where even our middle to lower class are rich, 72% of Americans report feeling stressed about money, at least for a little bit in this past month. That 3/4 of our country, no matter what they earn and no matter where they're at, they're stressed about money and do I have enough and will I have enough? Because again, it's not about money. Dollars and cents don't do anything for you. It's about what it brings with it. And so the third point I want to make is, if you know your heavenly worth, you won't worry about your net worth. That's what Jesus was saying there. He's like, think about how much he loves you, how much greater of value you are than a bird and a flower, and yet they don't stress, they don't worry. So why in the world would you? Jesus reminds us of the power and the love and the breadth of God's care for us, so that we will guard against unnecessary stress and worry. Some of us are aging ourselves by how much we got the stress lines because you're always worried about having enough. Jesus is saying you don't have to do that, because you need to know how much you're worth, that you're a treasure in the eyes of God. And so why wouldn't he provide for you? Now let's put the guardrails in here like we always have to do. That doesn't mean we sit back and get lazy, right? That doesn't mean that we don't consider Solomon's words in Proverbs 6. You may have heard this one. My grandmother would always quote this one to me. A little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. Scarcity will attack you like an armed robber. Right? Like, you got to get out there and do it. Again, I know we talked about this last week. It's like, I know our people don't use this as an excuse for you to sit there like a bump on a log and go, well, I don't have to worry, so I'll just sleep in today. If you're working in obedience to God's good plan for your life, because God created us to work and produce and do, right? That's why we're at our healthiest when we're active, right? So whatever it is that you're doing, go do it in obedience to what God's calling you to do without worry about how much you're worth. Because you know what you're worth. You might not have a lot of money in the bank, but you know that you're worthy. But we let that stress us. 1 in 4 divorces are over money, because we're letting that worry and that stress torpedo our relationships and our joy and our happiness. Keep reading. Verse 32 says this, and he continues to encourage them. He says, so don't be afraid, little flock, for it gives your Father great happiness to give you the kingdom. I love that line. Gives the Father great, he wants to do that for you. He wants to give you the kingdom. And then he says in 33, he says, sell your possessions and give to those in need. This will store up treasures for you in heaven. And the purses of heaven never get old or develop holes. Your treasure will be safe. No thief can steal it and no moth can destroy it. I guess a better 2023 illustration would be there's no inflation in heaven, right? It's not going to, your investment, I remember when I was about 13, the college savings account my grandfather started for me was a certain amount. And by the time I had gotten to the end of high school, it had shrunk because, stocks and numbers and Dow Jones and stuff I don't understand. But all I knew is it wasn't what it was. You wouldn't have to worry about that in heaven. And so he says, sell your possessions. Now, again, you're going, well, wait a minute. Does that mean I have to I have to go sell my house now so I don't have a place for my family to live? They're not saying sell all your possessions. He told the rich young ruler, sell all your possessions. He's telling us, hey, be willing to part with anything you have for the sake of someone in need, because guess what? That blessing is going to be greater for you in heaven. Some of y'all this is what I've noticed people on, especially, I've never seen a guy do this. So I'm sure this is not just ladies, but all you ladies that like to go, it's closet clean out time. And you'll put this Facebook post and say, I'm cleaning out my closet. Check the comments for all the stuff. And you have like a Target full of, a whole Walmart floor full of clothes that are sitting in your closet that you don't use anymore. There's a couple of my Facebook friends that have one of those about every 6 months. I'm like, dang, you just got rid of all this stuff. How much is in that closet? Because they take the money that they sell and go buy more stuff for them, right? And so maybe if you clean out your closet and you have a little yard sale for your stuff, maybe you don't use that same money to go find more junk to put back in your house. Maybe you give that to somebody else who doesn't have it. Donate it to Love Chatham. Something like that, right? That's because, number 4, keep writing, here we go. Generosity is both a cause and an effect of the abundant life. This is an important part of living the abundant life when it comes to Christ. That generosity, I say it's a cause and an effect, because when you're generous, it opens up the abundant life to you. If you're willing to be generous, then you're giving away things and yet you're being more fulfilled. But it's also an effect. It's just a byproduct of it. If you're living the abundant life, you have more than you need, and therefore you are generous with what you have. But let's be real. Some of y'all can't be generous with others because you've convinced yourself that your wants are your needs. You've convinced yourself that you have to, now that you have this thing, you have this level of living, you can't dip back below that or you're slumming it again. I'm reminded every once in a while, I'll go back and I'll find my old budget from when Jen and I first got married. I'm like, how did we live on that? But we did, and we never went hungry, and we were just happy. Why? Because generosity means that you're not dependent on those things to be happy. And by the way, this should not be a radical thing. You hear every once in a while about Christians and pastors that, they downgrade their big house and their nice cars and they, buy a used car instead of a new car. And everybody's like, oh, they're just so radical and so spiritual. I hope one day I could get to be like that. That should not be the exception. That should be the rule for Christians. And again, I'm not telling you can't have a new car. I'm not telling you can't have a big, I'm just saying that does it allow you to still be generous? And it should not be weird for you to deny yourself, as we talked about in week 1, to deny yourself some of the things that I really want that, and as soon as I have the money for that, I'm going to get that. What if you denied yourself and used that money instead to be generous to other people? But y'all convince yourself, if I just had more money, I would be generous. When really, you haven't been faithful with the little, so God's not going to give you more because you're not generous with what you have now. You feel like your wants are your needs. Now, again, let's put the other side up there. We got to be careful not to turn this into the poverty gospel, right? You know, there's the prosperity gospel. There's also the poverty gospel. The truth is, money itself is not evil, right? The love of money, we just read that verse earlier. The love of money, not money itself, is the root of all kinds of evils. Ecclesiastes 5:10 says, he who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This is also vanity. That means it's useless. It's surface level. There's no real meaning. Hebrews 13:5 says, keep your life free from the love of money and be content with whatever you have. For he said, I will never leave you or forsake you. The author of Hebrews is saying, why wouldn't you be content with what you have now? Because God's there for you, and that's all you need. So poverty is not a shortcut to holiness, right? Broke does not actually mean holy, right? Impulsive and unwise spending and a lack of effort and a lack of work is not a righteous excuse for you to not have a lot of money. Fact, in reality, I would love it if some of us could get our act together and actually have abundance and actually be shrewd and let that generate more income so that we can be good to others. Wouldn't it be great if Christians were rich and able to spread those riches around than those that are thinking about themselves? I would love for us to be able to do more with the kingdom if we had more money. It's not an excuse to work 80 hours and be selfish and chase your riches or whatever, but God is not a bad investor. I've said this to a lot of y'all before. God's not a bad investor. Why would he give you money if you're just going to squander it on yourself? Proverbs 11:25 says, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. God's like, ooh, when I give to Jim, the whole neighborhood eats. I'm going to keep doing that. Oh, when I give to Stephen, I'm blessing Stephen. I'm also blessing all these other people. I'm going to do more for him because of that. Proverbs 19:17 says, whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. Again, you can't manipulate God and be like, yeah, God, I'm going to be good to the poor. Money, please, right? It's not how it works. This is the key. We'll wrap up with this. Verse 34 brings it all together for us. Look back at Luke 12. It says, wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. Jesus says the key is contentment. The key is, what are you happy with? What are you satisfied with? We were talking Wednesday night about using verses in context. Those of y'all that were here on Wednesday remember that, how like you can make something say something very different if you pull it outside of the rest of the paragraph there. Well, everybody loves, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. That means that I can play in the NBA if I want to, right? And it's Jesus' fault that I'm not in the NBA, not my fault. Is that what that means? No. Look at that verse comes back to contentment. In Philippians 4, he says this. He's talking about how the church has been good to him and concerned for him. And he said, I know you didn't have a chance to help me before. He said, not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or everything. I've learned the secret to living in every situation, whether it's on a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. For I can do all things. I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. God has not promised to empower you to take that next step in your career necessarily so you can have more money. He might be. God has not empowered you to be able to automatically flip that investment into something that's going to make you rich. The strength that he's given you is so that you'll be okay either way. That if you do get rich and things do work out for you and you are smart with your money and you become where you want to be financially, you'll be content. But if you don't, you'll be just as content because it doesn't matter. 1 Timothy 6 says that Paul was able to, because of that, he was able to tell Timothy, true godliness, 1 Timothy 6:6-8, true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into this world, and we can't take anything away. It's not going to do you any good once you go. That's back to Jesus' parable there. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. I love those kind of two-handed things. Like speak the truth in love. True godliness with contentment equals great wealth. Because you don't need those things. That if things don't work out financially for you, if you never move past that job, if so many plans that we have that we think, if I don't have this, I'm not going to be happy. This past fall, y'all remember when the jackpot got like really up there, right? It was like what, November? I remember it was like November because that's when I was recovering from my surgery, and I saw that and just sat there and thought about. I usually don't do this because I don't have time to think about this. I was like, man, what would I do with all that money? What if I just went out and like bought a lottery ticket at the Speedway up there, and because I'm God's favorite idiot, He blessed me with the winning lotto ticket. And I started thinking about it. I said, you know what? I got time. And I just thought through all the things I would do for the church, for the community. I was like, man, Love Chatham would be set. We'd get us a new church building. We'd be doing this and doing that. And the farther I went down those rabbit trails, the more I realized, ooh, that would be a lot of time. Oh, that would be a lot of this. That would be a lot of that. And it was like, I would make all these things happen, but I would still be a pastor. I'd still want to spend time with my wife and kids. Like I would do all those things so that I could just do what I'm already doing right now. And while there would be great, hey, if y'all want to give me a winning lottery ticket, I'll take it. But the point is that either way, it's not going to change. It's not going to change Jesus. So even if this is what clicked. That's why I did time last week, because think about all the time we could save if we didn't think we needed to work as much. Well, if you were just content with the clunker of a car, unless sometimes those cars cost more money than they're worth. I get it, I know. But I'm saying a lot of us introduce wants as needs, and therefore we have to work more, and we have to maintain this type of lifestyle that would save us time, money, and worry if we just realized we didn't need it. Abundance is having more than we need. I think instead of trying to get more than we have, we need to lower the bar for what we need. And then maybe you'll be content. Then maybe you can sleep at night. Then maybe you have a weekend every once in a while. Then you get to, maybe your friends and your family will remember your face because you're not working so daggone much. So as we get ready for our invitation, let me ask you a couple questions. Are you content? Not are you complacent, not are you lazy, but are you content? Are you happy? Would you be happy with the hand that God would deal you? Or is your contentment based on, all right, God, I'll be happy in you if you give me blank? Are you generous? Because guess what? He was with you. Sometimes I think that we forget how good He's been to us, and that should actually turn us into more generous people to others. But I think the important thing is, do you know your worth? Y'all don't have to do it yet. We're going to sing first, but then, yes, thank you for being Ray. They're like, Ray, we'll shake them down now, but it's done. Yeah, they're ready. Yeah, I got my, bring the thing for the kneecaps. Okay, good. All right. Do you know your worth? Here's the thing. Do you know your worth? Not your net worth, not what you're worth on paper, but what you're worth in heaven. What you're worth to God. Because here's the thing. We are going to have to make a decision. I know I put a slide in between there, but Andrew, I put up Matthew 6:24. Here's the decision you need to make. Jesus says this: no one can serve two masters. He'll either hate one or love another. He'll be devoted to one or despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Either God's your master or money is. It's not really a choice, or it's a choice. It's not. You can't really have both. And so that's the choice we need to make. If we want the abundant life that comes from following Jesus, then we can't serve money too. We can't be beholden and idolatrous towards money and what it brings and the lifestyle and the security. We have to take all of those things and put them back in the hands of God. And so if you're struggling with contentment right now, this should be good news. You should realize that you don't have to have that thing. That job that you're in right now doesn't have to be a dead-end job because you have Jesus. That promotion you got passed over or the whatever, there's a lot of things that happen that tempt us into frustration with our financial situations. Some holy contentment would really help out. So as we sing, I ask you to stand with us and consider those questions. And if you're not content, maybe ask Jesus to make you content with what you have, to help you appreciate and do well with a little. Again, catch-22 time, he's not going to give you more until you're content with what you have. Do you know that you shouldn't have to worry? This is why worry is sin. Because worry shows that I don't know who I am to God. And I'm thinking if my bank account gets below a certain amount or if I don't have X, Y, and Z, I'm just not going to be able to get through. Jesus is like, God's got you no matter what. He will provide for you even when the math doesn't work good on paper. Do you know how much you mean to him? When you know that, you begin to understand the treasure that he should be to us. That's why it's harder for a rich man to get into heaven than was a camel to walk through the eye of the needle, because we get distracted. We start making stuff our God and not God our God. Can we refocus on him this morning?